Welcome to Coffee and Catastrophe with Brent and Gabi. This is Gabi.
This is Brent.
So this is episode 2 of the podcast. At this point, we had microphones and more equipment, and you'll be instantly able to hear the difference. But we were still figuring things out.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much every time I've come over for the past couple episodes, we were just trying to troubleshoot and see what would make the best sound and just experimenting with it. So we are definitely getting better. And we originally did record a very, very cheesy intro to this one, hence the edit now.
Hence us talking right now.
Yeah. We had this gimmick where we would open the show like from a different location every episode, but then we just decided that we went too many places, and
it was a little gimmicky. It didn't make sense.
Yeah, it was cool when we started, but it just kind of, the fire just slowly died out, and we just changed the way that we introduce the show now.
Yeah. But here is episode 2, all on insecurity. We hope you like it as much as we do. But when I think of the word insecurity, the first thing that pops into my head is like personal insecurities and things we are insecure about. Do you want to start us off with things that you are insecure about?
Oh, I just got off of work from like lifting boxes and moving around a warehouse all day, and I'm really insecure that like the kitchen right now reeks of lower back and ass.
Oh.
From me.
You're worried that you smell. You're insecure about your scent.
All the time.
I haven't been able to smell you, so I think you're fine.
Okay, like all the time, because I have like this really like strong feeling like on my back.
Really?
Yeah, because like I sweat from my back and shit, and like right now I'm just like, oh my god, the stink lines are coming off of me, and I'm like gonna be kicked out of wherever I go because I smell.
That's really interesting. I'm not insecure about the way I smell, unless I haven't like maybe washed my hair in a couple days. Like this, I don't know if you're aware of this new trend where you use dry shampoo instead of actually showering. It's great for me because it keeps my hair's color nice. But I do get a little conscious, like I'm kind of worried that people will notice that like, oh man, Gabby's hair has looked the same for like a couple days. Or I'm worried that there's like a kink in the like waves of my hair behind my head. Or I should say at the back of my head, not behind my head. At the back of my head, that like everyone like gives away the fact that like I haven't washed my hair in about 3 to 4 days.
Yeah, I mean, I have to shower every single day. I mean, like the longest time I've ever gone without showering was when I was on an Amtrak train going from Chicago to LA, and it was a 43-hour trip with no shower. Well, you could have rented a room on there that would have cost hundreds of dollars. So I just went to the bathroom and sprayed, and that did nothing. So I just felt so disgusting for 2 days. And we went to the train station a few hours before that. So I went a full 2 days without showering. And when I finally took the shower, the bathtub looked like that one scene in Encino Man where they washed off Brendan Fraser. So it was just, but I feel like that, like even like if I go a couple hours, like,
really?
Yeah, man.
I don't know what's up. I don't worry about the way I smell, like, at all. I think most of my insecurities are like, and maybe this is just symptomatic of being like a woman in America. Mine are all stem from like how I look in terms of like my weight mostly. I've never been really like concerned about, like not necessarily my hair, not necessarily the clothes that I'm wearing. But I have always felt insecure just about my size and my weight. For literally, I think the only reason is because, well, it's a combination of the culture you live in, your society, probably the people around you, what kind of media you're consuming. I would say that is like the insecurity that I always come back to and comes back all throughout like my life.
Yeah, so when do you think that started?
I think, honestly, my body insecurity probably, I think I remember being about 8 or 9 years old and being at dance class and realizing that my body was different in shape than the other girls around me. And I wasn't an overweight kid ever, I just recognized that like I didn't have the petite ballerina bone structure. I just recognized that. And I think immediately then like something switched in my head. And one like source that I really love for like fitness videos and workout videos is Fitness Splendor on YouTube. And it's a husband-wife team, and the wife of the team, Kelly, put out this video about her struggles with like weight and eating disorders and fitness throughout her life. And she said that she remembers being really young and just kind of thinking that her legs were fat and that she needed to go on a diet, and she was like 8 years old. And she said that it was probably a combination of the adults around her and the way they talked about food and dieting. And I definitely know my parents were conscious of like carbs. Like I think my dad was on South Beach diet, and I think I'd probably heard the word Atkins thrown around. So I think it was probably a combination of like everything in the environment and just where I was in that kind of vulnerable state of being 8 or 9 years old that made it come on. Since I was at Loyola and I got my psychology degree, I think for my developmental psych class, I learned it's very, like, when you're 8 or 9 years old, that's the moment when you start comparing your bodies to other people, and you start recognizing that certain people's bodies in our culture or society have more value than another person's body. So I think it all stemmed from there. And, like, the sad thing is that I also know, like, from psychology, that when you think one thought repeatedly, it carves almost like a super deep neural pathway in your brain to the point that that thought can become automatic. So at a certain point in my life, it just, my insecurity of my weight, my size became like automatic thinking for me. And I still struggle with it like to this day, for sure.
So is that something that you're kind of like in a room and you're conscious of it? Like are you pretty much like how you feel about your body, or is it like how other people might perceive you?
That's interesting. It's definitely me. It's me comparing my body to other people in the room and being conscious of being larger than certain people. Like, I don't know. That's just like, I will have a thought like, I'm the biggest woman in this room, or I'm the biggest person in my friend group. And then, I mean, when I was probably in high school, that would translate into like, I'm the fat friend cliche. And again, like I was always in good health, like growing up, and still am in good health. But for some reason, it would always be comparing myself to other people's bodies. So I don't really think it was ever like, I'm worried that this guy's going to think I'm fat. Well, maybe it is a little bit. I'd probably be lying if I said that that's not a part of it. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just that at a certain point in my mind, it really is automatic. And I do struggle to just recognize it as a thought and push it aside and not just take it as like fact the moment it comes into my brain.
Right. So, I mean, it's crazy like how ingrained that body image is, you know, in just our culture alone. Mm-hmm. You know, even like if it's, even like for people who are comfortable with their bodies, like they're still like the marketplace.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like you just don't see average or normal women like advertising stuff. And if it is, it's revolutionary. Like that's how ingrained it is.
Well, yeah. And the fact that it's like, I don't know, it's like certain body types always become in vogue or out of vogue. Like, I don't know what publication did it a few years ago, but someone had indicated like the new thing now is having a big butt. And before, 10 years ago, if someone asked like, does my butt look big in this? And a person said yes, you'd be horrified and start crying and change your outfit. But now, if you say, does my butt look big in this? It's like this great, amazing thing. So what's attractive is always changing. And it's so sad, though, because ultimately it pushes us towards demonizing one body type in favor of another. I think there are some, like, there's been some strides made with, like, body positivity movements, like, online, and just that kind of, even the word body positivity or body positive coming into the vernacular, maybe entering the zeitgeist, maybe things are improving. But from like a commercial standpoint, like a capitalist standpoint, I totally agree with you that it's quote unquote revolutionary to have a woman, larger than a size, 4 on something, which isn't to, again, demonize women who are size 4s or above or below, but we definitely have got caught into that craze of like perfect bodies and perfect everything with Photoshop and whatnot. It's so unrealistic. And maybe that's kind of like part of why I started gathering that insecurity so young, was because as a child, I didn't have the foresight or the understanding of like the images I'm seeing are doctored, or that just because a woman or a girl is smaller than you doesn't mean she has more value or worth than you. And then actually I saw an interview with Shirley Manson from Garbage, the lead singer of Garbage, was interviewed in 2015 or 16, and she had said how silly it is that girls want to live up to the standard of being beautiful, because she's like, beauty fades. Beauty's in vogue, it's out of vogue. I should say what is beautiful changes to one thing to the other, and you age and your looks will change. So it's the worst thing you could do to only live up to being beautiful. And I try to remind myself of that for sure. But yeah, I don't know. And the fact that it's so pervasive, like, I think that there's been many a study that have found that when you introduce media, like there was a case with the island of Fiji, they like introduced, I think it was television or something to the island that it hadn't had before, some type of medium, and anorexia was literally brought to the island, basically, like invented on the island, quote unquote, because the women were like starving themselves to achieve whatever body image they were seeing through the media or whatever. So I definitely think insecurity, no matter what kind, body or smell or whatever, it's definitely linked together for sure.
Right. I get, I'm lucky in the fact that like mine's not, well, it's socially ingrained in terms of there's a market around it. So for instance, like Axe body spray. Yeah. But the thing is if you smell like shit, you're not going to get the girl. Yeah. So like, that's the whole, but it's not as pervasive. I mean, definitely not, man, with like the female body image, because that's playing on your insecurity overall. Because I mean, with a guy, you smell like shit, that's it. You buy Axe, that's it. But with women, it's like the way you dress, the way you walk, the way, if you're wearing makeup, if you're thick in all the right places. And I think that's kind of the thing now in fashion magazines. Like, is she thick? You got the Kardashians, you got like Cardi B, Nicki Minaj, like they're praised for their quote unquote thickness. So, and it does change every now and then, because like I know like back in the 90s it was always like the Laker girls, like the cheerleaders in the sports teams. Well,
even like waifishly thin was like very popular for a while too, like especially when you look at like the 60s and 70s. Twiggy was Twiggy for a reason, because she was so small. So it definitely changes what's popular, and at a certain point we just it's hard, because we have to change the culture, and we have to have companies stop making images of women and people that are just a doctored or portray a false image. I mean, representation matters ultimately for everything. Representation matters. There's power in the images we see. Who is shown, and the flip of that, who is not shown. Who has the power in the image, who doesn't. And it's prevalently been the beautiful people have the power and the privilege, but who is beautiful changes. And you're so right in saying that companies prey upon insecurity to sell their product. And we were talking earlier, before we even started recording this podcast, about like consumerism versus capitalism, and how, there's almost like a meticulousness in the way that it tears down a woman's appearance. And I'm not saying that men do not have their bodies torn apart or they feel insecure about their weight, but there is something specific about, with women, it is your hair, your eyebrows, your nails, your feet, your legs. Are you hairy? Do you have your makeup on put on well? How are you dressed? So do you have jewelry on? So on and so forth. It just becomes exhausting. It really is. And it's all for an image, for beauty. I mean, sight is important, obviously, sight's important to many people. Looks are important to many people, but it's not the only thing at all. There's people who go their entire lives without being able to see. Clearly they're just fine. I don't know. I just feel like it it's so hard too, because I'm consciously aware that my mind should not be preoccupied with my appearance or comparing myself to other people in the room, or worried about, like, you know, being out on a date with a guy and constantly adjusting like the top I'm wearing because I'm worried that I won't look good, versus just being in the moment with that person and just enjoying his conversation wholly, or our conversation wholly, rather than up, like, you know, 5% of my brain is like, make sure you sit up straight and stick your boobs out because that looks best.
Yeah, and, you know, I just kind of piggybacking off what we were saying earlier, is just like what we do see in the media and what's represented, because there's no representation of just the average woman in terms of being successful. So, like, for instance, like, you'll have a guy on TV who's a complete slob pig, and he's married to someone who is quote unquote hot. So, okay, so for instance, Homer Simpson, Peter Griffin, you got King of Queens, you got trying to think of other TV shows, but like it's almost a cliche at this point where like
it's a caricature.
Yeah, you never see just like a slovenly, like, just like average, you know, pig of a woman who's with like a very attractive man in a TV show who's caricatured the same way as like Homer Simpson, where he's like, he's got his gut out, he's drinking beer, he's burping, and he's doing incredibly stupid shit. Like, there's just no woman like that. And to have like a Marge Simpson, and you know, I think just with guys, like, their insecurities are probably more on just like performance. So for instance, kind of like you know, you have to have the fast, you have to have a good car, you have to have a good job, you have to be a provider. But the thing is that you can also, you know, show your emotions. So you have to kind of be this, like, you know, alpha male in a sense, or you have to be like some sort of like artistically gifted. You couldn't just be average. But that doesn't weigh heavily on our consciousness the same way that women are with just the constant like self-checking in. Yeah. You know, like, I mean, it's different, but I know, like, you know, well, men in the media, like, okay, everyone has a 12-pack of abs, you know, and they're all, you know, buff as fuck. And, you know, you see like a skinny average guy, he can't make his way in there, but if he has other skills, that's redeemable. So if he's a really good speaker, or if it's like a DJ, or, you know, like what I've heard over the years, like Mick Jagger, you know, like, he is not a classically handsome man by any stretch of the means, but he's the lead singer of the Rolling Stones. Yeah, we don't see that in the media. It's like the lead singer of I'm just trying to think like of a lead singer of a band who's on the same level as Mick Jagger looks wise, who gets men based off of her status. Yeah, like, you're trying to think of like a female or a woman musician who it's the same thing, where she is maybe like, she isn't the epitome of what, I don't know, fashion magazines put on the cover, yet she attracts people. Yeah, like Susan Boyle isn't packing down like Brad Pitt's and like David Beckham's. Yeah, like, and it's so sad, because I was just thinking that maybe when we think of, at their core, women's insecurities, well, I should speak from my experience, whereas my experience as a woman and my insecurity comes from my looks, and you're speaking from a man's perspective, and that you feel that it's from this issue of providing. I mean, those kind of boil down into like provider. It goes into those archaic ideas of like what men and women should be, right? Yeah. Like, women must attract a mate so that they can become impregnated and carry on the human race, and that men must provide both their sperm and whatever that woman needs for a household or whatever. And he has to be the breadwinner and the provider to do his job, and the woman has to be attractive and then be attracted to his being able to provide. It's really heteronormative. It's really archaic. It's all bullshit. And even I, as a person who knows that it's bullshit, have been prey to that system. And it's literally warped my thinking about myself. I mean, I've had so much self-hatred and negativity about my body and who I am, all because of this system.
You know what I mean? Or the environment that I grew up in.
Yeah, I mean, and even still, like, just the environment out there. Like, you go to a clothing store, or okay, about two blocks away from where we are right now, there's a giant billboard about, I don't know, it's an advertisement for like a church, and it's just about like, okay, like go with God. But there's a very beautiful woman on the board.
Oh, really?
And it has nothing to do with religion.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. I think the system is going on it's playing on two different insecurities with us that are very implicit. So I think when I think back to the classical, stereotypical, best compliment that you can ever give a woman, she's like, I have to put on makeup. And then the man says, but you don't need makeup. You're pretty without makeup. But the reverse with the guy, the best thing that you could say to him is, you're right.
Really? Because, like, so, like, you know how there's that, like, that stereotype that, like, women always need to be right? I was almost thinking, like, oh, maybe that would be, like, the compliment. But you know what? No, it's, like, usually when in pop culture, they say, like, whenever there's a man telling a woman she's right, it's usually portrayed as there's been this huge argument and he finally concedes and said, honey, you're right. But no, I that's interesting. I never thought of that.
In terms of playing on an insecurity that the system produces.
Yeah.
Because if you think of it this way, like what the system produces for women, like especially like when they grow up, like a little girl, they are given dolls. The dolls have to look pretty. They have to maintain the dolls. And then they're given, you know, like jewelry, and then they're given dresses, and they have to be dainty, and they have to be passive and submissive. But with boys, like all of their toys are based on their creativity and their skills and their tools and like their intelligence. So the thing is like one of the things that really changed my mind about like all of this stuff is I saw an ad for Legos. I think it was in the 70s or the 80s, but it was like one of the first ads for Legos, and it was a family playing, like building the blocks. But then the next generation of that, there was a girl in the ad, and she's just a little kid, like, you know, overalls, pink shirt, you know, just a regular kid. Yeah. And she was holding just an object that she made with Legos, and it was about, you know, about like 2 feet. It was just a big structure. And then I think it said, what is it? It's beautiful. Or like, you know, it was something like that. So it was playing to your creativity, but now like boys, like the market for boys is, you know, just about action and intelligence, but with girls it's, you know, maintenance.
Yeah, well, and even think of that language. What is it? It's beautiful. Okay, so what you're aspiring to is to create, but you have to create beautiful things. And again, beauty isn't just objects of art. Beauty translates onto the person. And I think that's a loaded word. I mean, could you imagine that same advertisement with a boy holding the same object? What is it? It's beautiful. Like, what's interesting too is like for some reason, like whenever that word beautiful is applied to like a boy or a boy claiming something's beautiful, to me it always has like a deeper meaning than when it applies to like I don't know. I just feel like with the girl it was superficial, but if you put it on a boy's advertisement, somehow it adds more meaning to it. And I have no idea why I got that feeling. It's probably ingrained in me again because beautiful is just what's slapped on women and what they're supposed to aspire to, versus, you know, when a man is beautiful or creates something beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, like, if a guy says something's beautiful that's not existential or relating to a woman, then he's seen as a sissy. So, of course, it only is related to the feminine to talk about beauty. And, I mean, unless you are talking about, like, a piece of art, you know, but even still, it has, like, more of a, like, feminine, like, connotation to it.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't look at, like, a buff guy and be like, oh, man, he's beautiful. I wish I could be him. Like, as a dude.
As a dude, yeah. I'm not a dude, so I don't know. But no, you're exactly right. Which I had that thought when I was thinking about the advertisements of boy versus girl, that it's beautiful. And a part of me was wondering if, like, how do you feel about, like, when you call a woman handsome versus calling a man beautiful? like handsome, I've always felt like if you called a woman handsome, that was an insult. And it didn't always, because I'm pretty sure I've read some old, canon text where they call a woman handsome and it's a compliment. But like calling a man beautiful, as a man, if you were called beautiful, would you be insulted? Would the average man be insulted if they were called beautiful versus handsome?
I think I'd be creeped out, and I'd be like, what? Like, no, that's, I would think it's more weird than complimentary or insulting. Like, I would feel insecure.
You'd feel insecure about it.
And I would question their genuineness and their motivations.
And question if they were, like, on acid or drugs and, like, you're beautiful in a haze. I feel like that's where I mostly hear, like, the word beautiful now is, like, it's kind of, like, a joke like that. Like, I think I've seen it, like, used where, like, some druggie or someone is on something and they're, like, talking to a person and just, like, enamored, looking at them with wide saucer eyes. They're like, you're so beautiful.
But I think I would take that more seriously than if, like, anyone said, or if a woman just said to me, like, hey, Brent, you're really beautiful. And I would just be like, thanks? I wouldn't know how to take that.
Interesting. Because I do think if someone was just like, hey, Gabby, you're really handsome, I would be like, are you trying to insult me? Because well, why didn't you just say beautiful? But again, maybe that's just like the traces of gendered language. Like, women are beautiful, whereas men are handsome. Where the English language doesn't have, like, our nouns don't have genders, but yet we do tie specific words to specific genders. And we're speaking very in a binary, which obviously we know is bullshit, but it's if we were to, like, expand that conversation, like, we could go beyond binary of gender here. I think that the great thing is now we are looking at words like beautiful versus handsome or just words in general and trying to strip the gender out of it.
No, I understand what you're saying, and it's just that it's kind of it needs to be updated.
Yes, exactly. It's, again, archaic. We're moving finally into recognizing people for being people and for being who they are, not just shoving them in a box labeled man or woman.
Yeah, I think media is getting there, but there's still something within the youth that follows that very strict, like, binary code, where unless the kid is, like, taught by, woke parents, or really educated parents, like, it's hard for just, like, groups of kids in general to just not adhere to those. I think it's just one of those things that kind of comes with age, is just how you treat people.
Yeah.
But that's, like, those ideas are really prevalent, like, especially, like, with the youngins. And I think that the media still plays a big part of it. And because we like to categorize stuff, we like to make stuff easy to sort out. Because if one word, or if a person could just be anything, then there'd be no market.
Like psychologically, you want to know how to categorize something or someone, because then you know how to react to it. That's why oftentimes if a person is androgynous, a person internally might be freaking out because they don't know what box to put them in. It's why that Saturday Night Live sketch in the 90s, I believe, the character Pat, where, like, the character would say, like, ambiguous things that led the audience and whoever they were speaking to believe they were one gender, and then they, like, flipped it and said something really ironic, and then you just never knew what gender the character was. Like, the reason that whole sketch is hysterical and got multiple, like, sketches of it is because it plays off that stupid psychological need to put someone in a box in order to respond and react to them. And it's hard because, like, your brain wants that, and it makes me think, well, what if we just had a culture like, this is how you treat people, not how you treat this gender or that gender. This is just how you should react and respond and interact with people. But again, it's like, that would require that I'm not saying, but it requires this. It does require this, and we should be working towards that.
And we should. And even in the movie, it's called It's Pat. Like, they address the same thing, and like the big question in the movie is what's Pat's gender. And I think it's been a while since I've seen it, but Pat marries somebody, and at the end of the movie, she like, you know, she knows, you know, the gender, but doesn't say anything, and the question's never answered, and they just kind of live happily ever after.
By she, you mean whomever Pat marries?
Yeah, Pat marries a woman. So, but the woman knows the gender, or the sex rather, and it's still ambiguous, but they still live happily ever after. And I think there were some characters in the movie who were like, what the fuck? We wanted to know. But I just think that it all kind of goes with the marketplace, and it all comes with just this other part of just kind of wanting to fit in.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like harkening back to like when we were talking about fear. I think insecurity is just like a constant check-in of how we fit in.
Yeah.
And I think fear is like the result of that. So like the fear of being rejected. But the thing is, I'm insecure about certain things because if I perform X way, then I will get the result I want. I'm insecure about certain things because if I perform X way, then I will get the result I want.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's just a lot of like our personal insecurities, and you know, definitely self-image is one of them, because there's always somebody else who's just like, you know, everyone thinks it's beautiful.
Yeah. Or
there's always somebody else everyone's like, oh my God, he's a beautiful guy. I wish I was like him. No dudes say that, but you know, I think that's like the initial first impression.
Yeah.
But then when you really talk to people, like you really say like, oh, like sometimes like that guy who's attractive, he's really dumb as fuck.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of brings in like there's different things to be attracted to in a person beyond their looks. And like a part of me, I think that maybe sure like their looks attract you. I mean, that's what Tinder works off of. I forget who in my life said it, but they were like, Tinder is basically like a human meat catalog, and you swipe right on the meat that you like and left and you don't. That's a disgusting image, but it's just like purely based off of looks. I mean, you do have a little section about your bio. You can say where you went to school or where you work and your age and how close they are to you. Even link your Instagram, your Spotify. But I mean, like, looks are just one thing to be attracted to. I mean, I can't even tell you the amount of times that, like, maybe I've talked to somebody thinking that they, like, this person maybe's wearing a band t-shirt that I really like. Oh, man, that guy's got a Bad Brains t-shirt. I'm going to talk to him. Be really cool. And, like, no conversation. Or, again, match with someone on Tinder. Like, oh, you seem really interesting. Like, or, like, we like a lot of the same stuff. Let's try to hold a conversation. And then you can't. And it fails. Like, there's something to be spoken for the fact that, like, beauty and image is not all that to be attracted to.
No, because there's always, like, because that's initial. Like, that's, like, you know, on the foreground. That's, you know, like, the kind of, like, the spark. You know, that's why I really don't believe it love at first sight. You know, it's always, it's pure lust. You know, like, okay, you want to fuck someone that you're really attracted to. Yeah. You know, like, the first time, and then, you know, you talk to them, or, you know, like, if Charles Manson was a sex symbol. Ew. Like a for real one, you know. Or, okay, if he was a rock star, then that would kind of make him into one. But,
yeah, yes.
But the thing is that I think if you say the things that he said, it kind of takes everybody down a peg. You know, whoever it is. But, yeah. I don't know, like, humans are so different. Like, there's a lot more layers. Like, we have, like, some animal stuff, like, left over. But the thing is, it's just, like, we're kind of, like, the next stage of that. Like, the only way to, like, get rid of the animal part is if we were just fucking spirits and souls just wandering around and we had no physical form.
I'm laughing because you said souls wandering around, and I was thinking brains in jars. Yeah. I don't, like, you know what I mean? If we were just brains in jars on bookshelves and all you had was, like, communication telepathically, obviously, because you're just a brain in a jar. If that's all you had, you'd have to be, you know, have really great chemistry verbally or intellectually with someone for that to go anywhere. And I think that, I don't know, both are important in theory, But what wins out over time, because again, beauty and looks fade, what kind of remains generally is the intellectual conversations and chemistry and being able to connect about ideas and connect thoughtfully with each other, not just be like, you're super hot, I want to lick your body.
Yeah, because that helps. But
it helps for sure. I'm not denying it's great, but
No, I know, because it's kind of both. It's like you need the spark, but you also need like the engine.
Yeah.
But I still think if we were brains, there'd be like, hey man, you see her amygdala? Oh my god, man, that thing's the size of a fucking walnut.
Oh, I almost said corpus callosum. Now I need my psych degree revoked, and my AP psychology teacher, Mrs. O'Connor, is going to be very upset. I think the corpus callosum is what connects the two hemispheres of the brain, but you couldn't see that. So what if they were like, yo man, you see how long her brain stem is? Yeah man, look at that prefrontal cortex, man.
Yeah, well,
she's got a beautiful prefrontal cortex.
Oh man, that's kind of weird if she got a big one, right?
Wait, maybe. Is it?
I don't know. I mean, would you date someone with a big prefrontal cortex?
That's okay. Now I really deserve my psychology degree to be revoked because I can't remember what the prefrontal cortex does. I think it does with executive functioning and reasoning. So maybe they're a very reasonable person. Man, her cerebellum is just it's so thick. She got a thick cerebellum. She got thick cerebellum, man.
Oh yeah, I should go talk to her. Oh man, my jar's too small.
Oh no, then it got back to looks. My jar's too small.
Yeah, and then like it would just repeat anew, and then
so even if we were, I think what we're learning here is even if we were brains and jars, it would come back to looks.
Yeah, because if you think of it, like our brains are responsible for all the bullshit that's ever happened.
Unpack that for me.
Okay, well, think of it this way: it's like brains stem from ideas, or ideas stem from brains, right?
Yes,
it's not like idea and like fucking brain comes out of the sky, but like like ideas stem from brains, and then the brains have to make shit easier for the brains to process. Because if I really took in every single bit of information that is around me right now, both audio and visual and cerebral, I would be so overloaded, I would probably explode. It's
true that your brain knows how to filter things out and to put things. I should say, most brains can do that. Some brains really struggle with being able to mute certain things in the room, and then it can cause issues for them.
Yeah, because it's infinite, and the thing is like that's kind of like it with our insecurities.
Yeah,
because like we have to kind of, if we own in on just one of them, even though that one's kind of the most severe, it kind of makes it easier to go through life. Because if I was carrying around with me every single little bit of insecurity that I am insecure about with me at all times, I don't know, I would probably just crash into a flagpole like on purpose. Or well, I don't know, not flagpole, a brick wall. Because flagpole would just probably tip over and I'd pay a fine. But brick wall,
you'd probably just get a bruise or a black eye and be done.
Yeah,
but a brick wall, you did.
And here's the thing, though. Even like kind of with my insecurity, like from smelling. Ever since that I started like self-educating myself, I've become really insecure about my intelligence.
Really?
Yeah. So maybe it's like, okay, because I wasn't this open or learned before. So literally, like this is just the past 3 years of my life. So literally from April 20th, 2014 until now. This has been literally like the new phase of my life. Yeah. So if it's just like, this is all just a big joke, my brain's causing that.
Well, and it is true that I think that when I think of other things that we as in humans can be insecure about, looks is very prominent. Our ability to do things. I mean, I know while the biggest insecurity I come back to probably on a daily basis is my body or my self-image, another insecurity I would have regarding performances like my ability as like a guitar player, as a singer or a songwriter. That's certainly there, but I don't fixate on it every day. But something that humans can be very insecure about is their intelligence or their education levels. And initially my thoughts when we had decided this topic of insecurity was personal insecurities, as we opened with. But I also think about like literally being materialistically insecure. So not having monetary means to do the things you want to do, or being insecure with resources like food and water across the world. Things as privileges like education, and being insecure about being unable to afford education, or I think in our current educational landscape in America, being insecure when you're the kid who doesn't want to go to college, you know, and being insecure about, you know, you want to work with your hands every day. Maybe you want to be a mechanic, maybe you want to do painting, whatever that is, but you're not the kid who is aspiring to go to college, and ultimately you're kind of written off. And then that student becomes insecure because they're not for academia or the world of academics, and instead they're pushed aside or outcast into working with their hands, when in actuality there's value for both spheres. And it ultimately is continuing education regardless of what you do, because even the mechanic or the carpenter or the electrician, they have apprenticeships and continuing education to hone their craft and their skill sets. It's not, and that's just as demanding as it would be to go to college, a liberal arts college, and devote yourself to, you know, 36 credit hour degree. It takes you 4 years, you know, in and out, studying, working on papers, researching, so on and so forth. Both have value, yet it's something that can be pitted against each other and make us feel insecure.
Now, like, what you saying that, this has really gotten me thinking about this question. Do you think insecurity is a socially constructed concept?
Oh my God. That's such a good question. Because I lean more towards the power of the situation and the power of context. I would say it is socially constructed. And if we were to look at, I was going to compare it to animals, but animals maybe don't have the self-perception or self-concept to become insecure. You probably need a prefrontal cortex to worry about those things, to be honest, because the brain developed like forward. I thank you, Charles from Lake Forest College, for teaching me that. And if I'm butchering it, I apologize. But I believe what he told me, he was in neuroscience, was that the brain developed forward. And so all the executive functioning and reasoning is towards the front of your brain. If I'm remembering this right, again, please revoke my psych degree, Loyola University of Chicago. But because all that's in the front, animals don't necessarily have that to the extent level that we do with those executive functioning and reasoning abilities. So animals can't necessarily have insecurity, maybe. This might just be a human thing. Like, our brain is capable of having insecurities, but what brings it on is the environment. It's in my eyes, it's probably that. We have the capability, then the environment brings it on.
Yeah, because it's like, if you meet someone who you feel that you can truly be yourself with, then you're not as insecure with them.
No.
You know, like, if you could, like, just like, say, like, your darkest things, or like or you could just blow the nastiest fart like in their presence, and they're just like, that smells, but that's fucking hilarious.
Yeah,
or they react the way that you want to react, and like, you just kind of like gain that trust, you know. Then the insecurity goes away. And like, when you don't have that insecurity, that's like when you're being like true human. Mm-hmm. And when you're completely by yourself and not pondering, you know, deep existential dark thoughts, mm-hmm. you know, there's no insecurity. Like, if you're just like in a fucking forest and you're just like watching the birds, you're not like, oh man, these birds think that, you know, I'm stupid. You know, or the birds smell my lower back.
The birds think I'm fat.
Yeah, the birds think you're fat. And, you know, the birds think that you got a pretty big prefrontal cortex for a chick. That's kind of weird. You know.
Yeah, no. No, I do agree, and I think it is a human ailment. That being said, though, insecurities, you know, do get internalized. Like, I literally was just thinking I would be alone in the forest thinking that my thighs were too big. Like, that's how in deep these insecurities can be ingrained. And again, it has to deal a lot with like with certain thoughts becoming automatic when you carve those deep neural pathways in your brain where certain thoughts just become automatic after a while. And then you literally have to rewire your brain to stop thinking that way. So it's not that insecurity is entirely... I question if insecurity is entirely insurmountable. Do you think there's a person out there who is 100% secure with who they are? There's not a shred of insecurity within them.
Yes.
Yeah?
And we were all that person at one point in time, and they're little kids.
Oh.
They're like babies. Because a baby, I mean, as comfortable as I am around you right now, I can't just openly shit my pants.
Well, and I don't think I'd want you to, frankly.
Yeah.
Just to be honest.
But a baby, they don't give a fuck. They just shit their pants.
Oh, but can they also control their bowel movements?
Well, no. But here's the thing. If I couldn't control my bowel movements around you and I just shit my pants, that would be humiliating. If I couldn't control it. Like, let's just, like if I had a loose colon, and I was just like, hey, Gabby, let's eat dinner. And I just completely obliterated my pants.
Yes.
I would be like, I'm so sorry. And you'd be like, it's okay. It's okay. Like you'd have to constantly reassure me. But a baby just is like, yeah, I just shit my pants.
Well, yeah. Yes. But I think you are right. Because even if we move beyond like babies, like let's take like a 5-year-old. A 5-year-old or maybe even a 4-year-old. A 4-year-old probably still has like all security. Maybe they start like asking questions or like noticing differences, but I think they're probably still secure. And the insecurity probably starts setting in when you start having like self-concept and like perceiving and comparing people, and then also internalizing the value that is placed on one type of body or one type of person or one type of skill more than anything.
Yeah, because I think it's one of those things where it's part of being human. So so is there an adult walking around with absolutely no insecurities? No. I just think that perhaps with those people, they have mastered the way to go around their insecurities. So like they became more brave.
Yes.
It's not that the world became more accepting. It's just that they were able to go forward with that. So it was kind of like the Achilles heel or something,
Yeah, and I think that, do you think there's any benefit to insecurity? Do you think that maybe like it pushes you to be a better person? Can it be constructive rather than destructive?
It really depends on your perception too. So for instance, like if you're insecure with like your body, could that self-awareness transfer over to other parts of your life? So for instance, what could I be doing with myself to make myself the absolute best version of myself?
Yeah.
So for instance, like if you were as hypercritical with your body as you were with like your short-term and long-term goals, what would that mean? Or would that just create more anxiety?
Yeah, and I think from stemming from personal experience, it often is, my insecurity is more destructive than constructive, because it ends up being a downward mental spiral and, negative thoughts and, self-hatred more than it is fuel for like, okay, I'm going to like cut out added sugar, or I'm going to exercise, 5 times this week or whatever. I think it, at least for me, and maybe I'm just like a naturally more like pessimistic, negative person, but it always to me has been more destructive than anything.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't think there's like, oh yeah, I'm fucking afraid, I'm gonna do this. Like, I don't think it's ever going to be constructive. But if you were to put the energy from that and transfer it into something else, but not to say to get rid of it. Yeah, it's just that if you were to like still have the same mental deconstruction of that, I think it could be constructive. But I don't know. It really depends. Like if you were really a severe asshole at one point in your life and someone called you out on it, then you'd be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Even if you weren't being an asshole in the moment when you said it years later, like you were in a similar situation. But I don't know, I think insecurity, it's a stamp of negative emotions that is stamped on you in ink by society. But I think your own mental psyche dries it.
Yeah, I think you're right there.
Keep going.
Okay. So take that like stereotypical example of like a cancer patient that finds out they have cancer, they got 3 months to live, and they make their bucket list or whatever. Like, or there was even, I think, a movie called The Bucket List, and they like literally check things off of their bucket lists. Sometimes you can use fear to motivate you, I suppose, in that way. But I still, and a part of me wants to say, well, in theory, insecurity and fear are linked in that way, and they can be used together. But it really does depend, I think, on the type of person you are and how you respond to those types of feelings and emotions.
Yeah, because I think fear may be like fear is perhaps avoidance, but insecurity is just it's not necessarily avoidance, it's inadequacy plus negativity. So
well, and how could you perceive what adequacy versus inadequacy is if you couldn't compare yourself to other people?
Yeah, because I think if you're adequate if you're adequate about something, then you are secure about it. So I don't know if I could be adequate about my insecurity. Like I could be comfortable with like, yeah, like, or maybe like, yeah, my back does smell like shit when I sweat. But that's
you just own it. You just own it.
Yeah. So like, but it's still kind of an insecurity in the sense that like you're aware of it.
Yeah, and also, we're assigning value to just like. To these things. So for example, there's like observation versus like the value that I place on it and the judgment that I make. So like I weigh X amount of pounds. X amount of pounds is just the fact. I assign value to X amount of pounds. X amount of pounds is quote unquote too much for my body or too much overall. And I even heard a 14-year-old kid say that today. I weigh X amount of pounds and that's just too much. And then other kids were like, well, you don't look like you weigh that much. And I literally looked at her and I said, what does it even matter? It's just a number. And then one of the kids who did say, well, you don't look that much, she then said, Miss C's right. That's true. So I don't know. I think that it's definitely... Insecurity is pervasive just throughout our human experience. And I think we've kind of decided it's always going to kind of be there.
Yeah. So there's no way to, like, I'm never going to be completely secure with myself around any of my insecurities. Like, I'm never going to be like, hey, my back smells like shit, so what? I'm always going to be dousing myself in Old Spice or Axe body spray. I'm always going to be insecure about whether, my intelligence is perceived as sophisticated, even though the journey to the points is very unsophisticated. I'm always going to be insecure with not being assertive in a lot of situations. I'm always going to be insecure about just not having a story to tell people if I haven't seen them in several years. So like, Brent, what are you doing at your life? Oh, I work in a warehouse and I'm stuck. I work at a college and they're like, oh yeah, you're a teacher. No, but it's just kind of, I think the only time I'm going to maybe be able to find out is if I am living the best possible version of myself and if I am the best I can be. Yeah. And then I can decide what I'm insecure about. Like once I have gotten over my own bullshit, then I could probably think about like, okay, what am I insecure about? Like what don't I have or what don't I want that I want that's not material? That's like what I want for my life. And am I living a very fulfilled life based on my own decisions?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that we harkened back earlier to like kind of the environment around us and how that affects our insecurities. And so what you're saying is being in a space in life where you're good with yourself. That is what has the ultimate impact with those insecurities, right? Yeah. And I think it also has to deal with the people around you. Who are the people around you that you trust will not pick apart your insecurities or will support your endeavors that maybe you're insecure about? Like maybe you're insecure about your education level and they push you through and they support you. And I feel like that also ties up in a neat bow our second episode, because episode 3 is all about trust. So this was Coffee and Catastrophe with Brent and Gabi. And until next time, see you later.
Be good to each other.